I'd like to introduce Moritz Zollinger from TEMET. He is a cybersecurity consultant there, and as a consultant, I'm very happy to hear you talk, because that means obviously you have to have a broader view, you have to figure out what are actually the requirements on cybersecurity and compliance, and get all the different puzzle pieces together in a hopefully better approach for cyber resiliency. So I'm looking forward to your talk. Thank you, Moritz.
Hello. So welcome everybody to the talk Keeping Pace, how to integrate cybersecurity and compliance requirements into fast-moving IT. So about me, my name is Moritz Zollinger. I've been a long-term visitor to the Swiss Cyberstorm, starting as a student. I would have never believed to be up here, but yet here I am. And of course, here are my contact details, and I'm also happy to connect on LinkedIn. So what's the situation we found? So there are a lot of new services, software as a service, microboards, and new technology popping up, like AI, agents, or even chatbots. And the problem, as a security responsible, it's challenging to keep things under control. It's hard to keep pace. So one solution we found together with the customer is a management approach, leveraging predefined cybersecurity and compliance requirements. So what is CCR, or cybersecurity and compliance requirements? In requirement engineering, there are two types of requirements. There are functional requirements, like a system shall do, a system shall send emails, a system shall be, or a system shall transfer money. And there are non-functional requirements, like a system shall be. A system shall be fast, or a system shall be maintainable. Or in our case, it shall be secure and compliant. So here are some examples, like an offline backup shall be established, or another requirement could be that personal data shall be deleted when no longer needed. So an NFR is a well-known industry term, whereas CCR was something we came up with, being well aware of the famous rock band CCR. So a CCR is basically, or most often, a non-functional requirement focusing on security. And where do we get these CCRs from? So they can be derived from acts, regulations, internal standards, external standards, and also experience. Oh, this was the wrong button. So these CCRs are linked into agile methods such as SAFe. So basically it's the NFRs, they're rooted into these frameworks. Thus also CCRs work well with SAFe. But you can also use them with other agile methods or even without them, so with traditional methods. So what's the basic concept now? We have these CCRs, these cybersecurity and compliance requirements. We want to give them to a project or epic, depending on how you work, and we assume, or we want to get a secure deliverable or a secure product increment out. So for every project, we identified 3 phases. There's usually some kind of analysis and design going on, some initialization. Then there in the middle, there is an implementation phase or realization phase. And in the end, there is some kind of review, release, publish, or product increment. And we also hooked our 3 phases to these. So we have selection and tailoring. In the beginning, in the middle, we have fulfillment and tracking of these requirements, and in the end, we have acceptance and verification. So what are we doing in the first step? We take all these requirements, the CCR catalog, using a security questionnaire, which is basically a shortcut risk analysis, and get this down to a shorter list of requirements, the CCR list. In the next phase, the fulfillment and tracking, we want to fulfill all these CCRs distributed, so not the security team is doing it, but each team through the organization. But we still track them centrally, and we also want to gather evidence. An important thing here is really to enable the organization to fulfill these requirements themselves. Here we have the slogan, fulfilled, agreed, accepted, but more on that just later. Then at the end of the project or product increment, we have acceptance and verification. So here the stakeholders, and these are not the typical project stakeholders, so these are security stakeholders like compliance team, verifies these CCRs and check if the requirements are met. Here we have always trust, sometimes verify. So this is not the famous zero trust slogan, because in general we believe that what our team is doing or what our company is doing is of good quality. So let's jump right in with selection and tailoring. So here we have this CCR catalog, which we now want to tailor to our specific project. We call this business alignment. So for examples, if we do not process any confidential data, there is no need to encrypt it, if this would be company policy. So we can also get rid of some requirements and only the project relevant requirements remain. In the next step, the infrastructure alignment, we want to align the project to the stack or the platform we're building up on. Because usually we're not starting from scratch. There might also be encrypted laptops or encrypted databases. So if this is already done by our technology stack, we do not have to care about it, and we can also mark it. So in the end, we remain with a shorter list, which now has to be fulfilled by the project. So now a bit more on this security questionnaire. So for example, here we're building an important service for our customers. And we get a requirement, which we always get. It's that API requests shall be authenticated, just because this is something we think is important. But of course, this from company to company, this can vary. So we do process confidential data, which means we have a requirement that we want to encrypt it. We want to keep our data safe. Then next, of course, if you would lose this data, it would be very bad. It's important customer data, so we need to have an offline backup. So we also have some roles and permissions involved, which means we need to connect to our company's IDP using single sign-on, and we need to have some kind of a role concept. We're also processing personal data, which means we have to do data protection impact assessments of those who are familiar with these data protection laws. Then, now here comes the interesting part, because we are running on our stack, on our platform, where there are already a lot of things are implemented. So we're not starting from scratch. We do not have to bother about offline backup, because the server team already did this, and we also do not need to care as a project about the encryption, because everything is already encrypted, so the database services which they provide are already fine and approved by the company. So let's get on to fulfillment and tracking. But first, a little bit more on these requirements. So these are not just the requirement by itself. So we also have acceptance criteria. This is also from the non-functional requirement industry standard, which are conditions that must be satisfied in order to be accepted. So we have some examples later, but this is kind of a checklist or a help by the people who have to fulfill the requirement can go through. We also have need to have support. There's some guidance for the project lead or the engineer on how to fulfill these CCRs, because we want to fulfill these requirements distributed and not the security team has to do all the work. There also needs to be evidence, which will be provided. So if we fulfill something, we can somehow prove that it has been done. So, for example, we have here two requirements. One is, we heard before, it's that we need to connect to the identity provider using single sign-on. So one acceptance criteria is it has to work, and Another one is that we have to use the SAML or OpenID Connect protocol. This is just two protocols you use with single sign-on. As evidence, we have to provide an architectural overview. And of course, if you don't know how to do it, as an engineer, you get this and you think, okay, what's happening now, what I'm supposed to do? There is a support. In this case, in this example, it's a wiki page where you get details instructions on how to fulfill this requirement. And you also have a contact. If you're really lost, you can contact the identity team at the company, and they will help you out. So the same goes with the role concept. So you can also do a step-by-step. You have to do a role concept. The roles need to be implemented with the identity access management system, and they also need to be assigned. As evidence is the concept, and you also get some guidance on this. So it's important to note, so this is examples, so don't just copy them. It's really just, they're shortened for the sake of demonstration. Here is our compliance NFR example. Here we need to do this data protection impact assessment, and as an evidence, we need to provide this this assessment, and also there is some templates, again, some help. So this is now the central part. So as a project lead, I have this list or this table, and as you can see here, the acceptance criteria are like checkboxes. They can go through them and check them. Here, for example, in number 5, the engineer said, yes, I've done all of this, and the project lead can say, okay, agreed, I'm happy, I see everything is here, it looks good, and as an evidence, they provide the link. It's here also important to have a lean exception management process, so in case maybe you cannot use this SAML or OIDC protocol, you need to use something else, that you can easily get to an exception which is well documented as well. So this list could be implemented in Jira or in Confluence or a Kanban board, depending on your organization. You can even have a dedicated tool, or you can have it as an Excel on a SharePoint. Of course, also these requirements really depend on the company. So on to the next phase. It's already the last phase is acceptance and verification. So in the middle we have the same table, but here we see the stakeholder on the left side. So it's a security team or the data protection team. And now we see in the middle everything is completed. They also have documented this. We have the evidence, we have the links or document uploads or however you want to do it. And the security team on the first one signs off and says, yes, this single sign-on is good. We agree. The identity team says, yes, the role concept is done. Also, the data protection office says, yes, we're happy with this assessment. So these phases can also overlap a little bit so that they maybe already approve it before and not just on the end. And now, hopefully, we have a secure and compliant product. So a little bit more on reporting and monitoring. So this is the centralized tracking. I think it's important to have an overview over all the projects with how critical they are, how many security requirements they have to fulfill. Again, depending on the tailoring, how many exceptions, and we have a nice overview. So the revision usually is very happy with some kind of this dashboard. It could be built in Confluence or SQL reports or whatever works best for you, for your company. So let's do a quick recap. In the selection and tailoring phase, we used the entire CCR catalog and tailored them to our project and to our infrastructure. In the fulfillment and tracking, we saw this table where we can go through these checkboxes and fulfill everything. We also get the help, we provide the evidence, and so on, and it's tracked usually on the dashboard. In acceptance and verification, the different security stakeholders accept these requirements and sign them off and say, yes, it's good. Something I haven't mentioned yet is the requirement equipment engineering and maintenance part, this gray bar. Of course, we have to take care about these requirements. We have to update them constantly. We have to work on the questionnaire to keep everything up to date. So if you would like to implement this now, of course, you need some kind of epic flow or project management process to hook into with these 3 phases: design, implementation, and release. It could be agile, but it would also work without agile. So this is really important to have because you need something to connect with. And we need a security team with power because it's quite a cultural shift. It depends on where you're coming from. It's not easy. Of course, if you're already using non-functional requirements, it's not a big step, but if you're using something different, it might be quite a change management process. So which artifacts would you need to build? Of course, we need the catalog and maintaining it with all the requirements, including the acceptance criteria, the support, so the help, and also the evidence which they should provide. We need this security questionnaire to tailor the requirements to the project and also align it with the infrastructure. We need this list we saw where we can track it. Again, depending on the company, this may vary greatly, so this is an important part. Then a dashboard, it's not necessary, but it's recommended to have an overview. Maybe there is already an overview over all the projects where you can just fit into. And last but not least, but this is a big part, you need to establish the cybersecurity and compliance requirement engineering process and also link it to the project management or epic flow. Another part, which is also quite important, is to enable the organization. So they need training, maybe web-based or maybe sessions. They need to know what are these non-functional requirements, what are the CCRs, how can I fulfill them, where do I get the help. So a security champion program can help. You can greatly benefit from this if you already have this implemented. And another thing is stakeholder management, so with all the different security stakeholders, the compliance team, the legal, or the backup team. So what are the benefits? What do we actually get from this? So we have clearly defined requirements, which is something quite important. We know what to do and what are we actually doing in security. The step-by-step process can reduce the effort of implementation, so it's time and cost saving. An interesting part here is actually in not just the team to define processes and to think like the organization or their internal customers. So for example, if you ask something on single sign-on, they will say, okay, I have it in the wiki here, I have it over there, and I say, okay, could you put this just all to one page, and then all the other project leads or security personnel can just refer to this page? And he says, yes, of course, I can do this. So this seems like a small thing, but it really helps because then you help them define processes and you speed up development. Yeah, it's distributed, so we reduce load on the security organization, and it scales because you get your security experts a little bit across the entire organization. There is evidence gathered, so this also might sound too small thing, but for revisions they can be quite interesting and important, and it can be quite cumbersome to get all the evidence once project is done. So they're usually very happy with these dashboards where you can see all the requirements and everything. Yes, and overall security and compliance increases. One interesting fact is that this could also be used in contracts as a part of third-party risk management, because when you outsource something and they process confidential customer data, you could have the requirement that they have to encrypt it. So actually the same you would apply internally. All right, so much on the framework. I want to give thanks to my employer, TEMET AG, who brought me up here. Also to my co-workers, Daniel and Bruno. Together with Daniel, I developed most of this framework. This would all have not been possible without Mobiliar, so my thanks also goes out to the Mobi, especially their security team and security architecture. I would also like to thank two here unnamed government organizations for improving this process. And of course, I also want to thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Moritz. It was a very interesting talk. Please, do you have any questions within the audience?
It's just too much.
That was too much. No, maybe I can start if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, part of change management is always also getting people to adapt the new systems and to encourage them to continuously, obviously, use it, because you always have to update the system. Do you have any ideas how to incite that change, and also basically you rework the working structure in many ways? So how do you get people to comply with your compliance tool?
Yeah. So when it's what they're actually doing is great, then it's hard to convince them. But if what they're doing is a pain to them, they might be very open to a new system, like to use this security and compliance requirements. But of course, you usually need an internal stakeholder who is also convinced and who pushes this as well and sees the benefits. So there's no golden thing I could tell you, do this and it will work. But yeah, it's a lot of work. You need to talk with people, convince them, get their doubts, show them the benefits. And yeah, if they're convinced, they might want to implement this. And yeah, the benefits can be quite great. And also depends where they're coming from. Maybe the change is not that big because they also use to acceptance criteria, to definition of done, definition of ready. So it fits well into. Of course, if they're doing something completely different, it might be harder. Yeah.
Any more questions? Even so cheeky, I might pose another one. Can your tool also, I mean, if part of a process, if I was thinking of secure software development, for example, can your tool be adapted to that as well? To more detailed steps?
Yeah, so it's not a tool, it's more of a methodology. But we don't have a tool to sell or something. Yeah. This is an important note I want to make. Yes, there are some requirements you can give on secure software development, on adhere to OWASP top 10, for example, but usually it's something you not only press with this method, because this needs to have the development team, they're building their secure pipeline, their GitLab, their runway, they're building all of this. You maybe could give to third parties some requirements, like you have to do static code analysis or dynamic code analysis. You can write this into the contracts. You could also give it to your internal team, but they would probably also have done it. Maybe if you have different software development or very, very different styles, could make sense to have requirements for each of them. And it's okay if you use our great Git something platform, you don't have to do it. But if you keep doing it on your laptop, please think of all these requirements. Do you really want to do it? And so to nudge them over to the main development platform. This could be. Once it's customary, we did it. We also have some requirements on secure software development. Sometimes you have a pen test requirement, depending on the criticality of the project, but not the full software development lifecycle or detailed OWASP rules.
Very interesting. We have a question over there.
It seems to be quite a static tool. Once done, basically you have to repeat maybe a step of your framework procedure every once in a while when you do some changes.
So it's
usually the question in terms of if you do some updates, do you have to run through the whole process every time you do a bigger change, major release, for example, something like that? And do you need to repeat each of the individual, let's say, check marks that you went through in the first round?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We thought about this. So it is for projects or for increments, right? So usually you do a project once and then it's okay. But with the agile world, of course, you do a sprint and then another sprint. So there are some who sort of, they just reassess it every time, but no, you don't have to go through all of it, right? But if you do a bigger change, you maybe have to think, okay, now we handle personal data, for example, which we did not before, then you will get new requirements. But going through all of this, I think, would be too much for most organizations. It's also, with a release nowadays, it's not just a release in the end, so some companies constantly release, right? So every couple of days they have feature toggles, so there it maybe makes sense to do it for the project or do it after a certain amount of time, like every year, every 2-3 sprints, or something like this, and only look at the things that have changed, because once you've implemented single sign-on and you change something completely else, you don't have to do it. Also, from my experience, the security questionnaire doesn't tailor everything, right? Especially if you're building up on a customer portal and you just add a little thing there, then you also have to filter it manually and say, okay, yeah, we see it doesn't make sense to do this, or you've already done it. So there is also discussion and, again, lean exception management process. Yeah. But it's a very good question, and we thought about this a lot. It was also hard to come up with solutions for that issue. Thank you very much.
Are there more questions? If not, I would like to thank you. Thank you, Moritz, for your nice talk. And in Incren, I really hope that you keep doing a good job, because secure software development is a huge topic. That's the one side, and all other secure compliance topics are also very important. So,
yeah,
thank you
very much.